All right, this is one of those our ad hoc sessions where that we are going to discuss about anything that we want to talk about. And Mikhail, I heard that
Mm-hmm.
you have captured quite a few of questions from your students
Mm-hmm.
that we
Mm-hmm.
could talk about.
Yeah.
So why don't we just try to go through them one at a
Mm-hmm.
time, however you want to arrange it. So let's just see what we
Uh-huh.
got. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's have a look. I think we got some good questions here, and basically, at least three people asked you a question, and we'll see
Okay.
if these questions will get you inspired to talk about all these topics. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So let's start with the first question. So the
Mm-hmm.
first question came from Mylan, and he is asking, if you were to buy a software
Mm-hmm.
in a particular website, how often should you expect to communicate with developers to ensure that the product is made efficiently and to your liking? So, how often do you communicate with developers in software development project?
Okay, it's an interesting question. Now, let's just make sure that we're talking about the same thing. Because there's a couple of
Mm-hmm.
things here. One is that when you buy software from a website, and the question is how
Mm-hmm.
often do you communicate with software developers to ensure that
Mm-hmm.
things are built to your liking? Now, when we say buy software in our industry, we really mean buy shrink wrap software. And shrink wrap,
Mm-hmm.
it's also a term that your students might not be familiar with. And what it means is that it's things that you can buy,
Mm-hmm.
software that you can buy off, like say from a store. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so like say what are the things that you can buy in the store? Windows,
Mm-hmm.
Office, whatever anything else that they sell there. What are some of the other
Mm-hmm.
software like video games? This is probably one thing that people buy a lot. Video games,
Mm-hmm.
right? And any other sort of productivity software, like say Adobe, you can buy these as well. And what these software have in common is that they are all pre-made for you. Okay, it's designed for many people to use, and it's designed completely by the developers with some customers' input, but it's mostly designed based on what the developers think that the customers need, and then they sell to the individual users a license to use it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
Yeah.
this when you buy software like this, you do not communicate with developers, and if you communicate with developers, chances are that you'll be communicating with their support team on things that goes wrong with this particular software. You might call Microsoft
Mm-hmm.
and say, "Hey, your window is continuously crash for whatever reason. It's really bugging me." That would be the type of call that you will be having with them. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and in those situations, as we said, you don't talk to Microsoft developers on how to program them. You just talk.
Mm-hmm.
You just buy them, use them. Hopefully, you're never gonna run into any issues. And
Mm-hmm.
chances are, even if you buy 10 versions from them, you probably never talk to any one of them that work at Microsoft.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, from the perspective of where you're going to be talking to developers, this is what's called custom development. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, you will be buying. You're not buying a software. You're buying developers' time. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You're saying, "Hey, come work for me for a certain amount of time, and within this amount of time, we are going to build. I'm going to ask you to build this particular software for us." And
Yeah.
so when we're discussing about software, these type of work, custom development, we talk about this a lot: build versus buy. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
buy is to buy things that are readily available, and build
Mm-hmm.
is where things are not readily available, so therefore you had to buy developers time to build something specific for you. And in this
Right.
case, this is what we are talking about when you say we want to buy software from some website. How often do you communicate with software devs? The better way of asking that question is when you want to build software, how often do you want to communicate with the devs? And Mikhail, you have a pretty good answer for that by now, right? How often do you communicate with
Yeah.
devs right now?
Every day, every day, every day.
Every day, exactly. If you are running a software project, so I think we covered this in our previous conversation as well. Software projects. If you are in a position to run software projects, you pretty much have to communicate with the developers every day. There's pretty much no other ways around it. Now, you can also hire a full service shop where you're not going to be managing the software projects. It's going to be someone, they will also come with project managers who will manage the project for you. And in that case, you can potentially communicate with them every week. But chances are that you will also find every week might not be a good enough communication channel for you. You might want to increase that. You might not have to do it every day, but I would say that if you are on a large enough project, you will find that every day it's probably going to be still a likely scenario. It's just that in this everyday conversation, you're likely to talk to them 1 hour a day, whereas if you're a project manager, you're going to be talking to them 8 hours a day, basically. So, so the answer to how often do you communicate with software dev is as frequently as you need, and expect that it could become every day. Basically, that'll be the answer.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. Okay, and the next question comes from Masayuki. He is asking, what's the most important thing in developing software? And I'm sure that there are multiple answers to this question, but we can just pick one. Like, in your opinion, what's the most important thing in developing software from your experience?
Most important thing in developing software. Okay. The most important thing in developing software, strictly speaking, there's a few things. So let's take a look at the one is that you have to have capability. Okay. If you want to develop software, you gotta have a capability of being able to create a software in the first place. You know, it seems trivial, but it's actually the way it is. You're not going to write softwares by hiring who is somebody who don't know how to write software. And I don't want to make anyone sound bad, but some, like, say you can hire some of the smartest guys in the world, like Nobel laureates in literature. Okay, they don't know how to write software. You can hire them, but they're not gonna be able to write the software for you. Okay,
sure.
And so at the very minimum, you gotta have people on the project who can develop the software, and that person can be you, the stakeholder. If you are a single person that can do everything, so capability is definitely one. But then after that, the next thing that you gotta have is that you gotta have a goal. Okay. If you want to develop software, then you gotta know what's the reason that you're trying to create this software. This again might also seem pretty straightforward, but what is very interesting is that a lot of people they just have a vague idea on what they're trying to do. They're trying to create software. They thought they want to create software, but they don't really know what they want to create. And those are the type of situation where that you're never going to have something that come together. Okay. And beyond, once you have a goal, then you have to be able to structure a project. Okay.
Yeah.
Your goal tells you where your project is gonna go. Okay. Basically, you want to build something. So what's that something? You have to be able to say it all. You have to be able to say, I want to build a website. I want to build a blogging software. I want to build a language learning tool. I want to build a forum tool. I want to be able to build something. You got to be able to at least say that goal out loud. But that saying that goal out loud by itself is still not enough. You now have to fill in all the details to the point where that those details can be translated into code. All right, and Mikhail, you have walked through this with us on the project that we're running together. We started with just the objective, what is the business goal? And then we then take that to translate into a bunch of business requirements or the list of things to do in order to fulfill that goal. And then we further translate that into a list of designs and so on. And then we put together a project plan for it. All these are necessary steps in order for you to know what you're trying to do. I mean, it's kind of like this. If you want to get from point A to point B, you first have to know where point B is, and that's your goal. And then you secondly have to be able to plot a course to get there. Okay.
Mhm.
And this might be a straight line, or this might be a curvy, wavy line. It depends on what the terrain looks like, right? And how do you get there?
Yeah.
Do you have a very powerful engine, a car vehicle to take you there, or do you have a very tiny vehicle now take you there slower, and that's your capability? So you gotta have all these different things together in order for you to develop software. And what's most important, the interesting thing is that if you lack any one of these things, you're not going to get there, basically. So, you can think of it saying that this is a stool that if you break down any particular leg, your stool is going to fall over. So,
Right.
so you got to have all of them, basically.
Okay.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Right. Yeah, and the next bunch of questions comes from one student, Kiko. So she asked you actually 8 questions. And
Okay, that's
it's
fine.
awesome.
That sounds like
It's
she's motivated and inspired. I like that.
Yeah, yeah.
So let's talk
Yes.
about
And
what questions that she has.
And she actually divided it into business questions and programming. No, not programming, but technical questions. And,
Okay.
both
Okay.
are
Sure.
quite interesting. So the first business question is, what are the important terms to do business with the person who you have never met before? And I think she's talking about freelancing experience. Like, for example, you hire a freelancer. Like, what are the terms of doing business? Like, if you never actually met that person, if you don't know that person very well, so what would you do to make sure that we can do business together?
Okay. That's a good question. And I think that most people, there's multiple different ways of doing it, I guess. So what are some of the possible approaches? One is to become friends.
Yep.
Okay. If you never met a person before, so therefore you're not comfortable with doing business with that person, but you thought there might be something there, then I think especially in Asia, there's always a way to look at how to do business is you try to become acquaintance. Then you try to get to know each other better. Then you try to see if that both people are going to be on the same page, and if so, then you can continue to take steps. So it's a gradual process. Right. It's a gradual process of saying, okay, stranger, acquaintance, then friend, then partner, something like that. I would say that's probably more of the Asian way of doing things. And over here, some things are done this way as well, but sometimes people try to shortcut the process. Right. So how do you shortcut the process? Then if you want to shortcut the process, you basically need to go through the concept of hiring. So how do you hire someone? You need to be able to, one, identify what you need. Okay. So what are you trying to hire? What skills do you need? A developer? An accountant? A lawyer?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. It's different sets of skills, but the process is the same. You have to first be able to say out loud what is the skills that you need. Now, within developers, there's multiple sub-branches, just like the same with lawyers. A lot of lawyers don't do every single type of law. Some focus on business laws, some focus on criminal laws, so on. So even if you just say, I need a lawyer, you probably had to get further refined on saying, what type of lawyer do you need? Maybe you need an immigration lawyer because you want to deal with immigration type of law, so on, right? And same with developers. You cannot just say, I need a developer. You also need to say, what type of developers do I need? Do I need developers that knows how to develop front-end application? Do I need developers that knows how to develop a back-end application? Do I need developers that knows how to develop, embedded application, so on? Or games. There's just different types of development out there that you need to be able to identify as well. And that, again, goes back to what we said before, that you need to first have a goal. because your goal is going to inform you what it is that you're trying to accomplish. So if you are trying to build some sort of website, then it doesn't make sense to hire people who are focusing on non-website type of development, right? You want to find developers who focuses on websites. So first thing you gotta do is you gotta identify what you need, and you gotta identify what is the type of skills that they are that they need to possess. You need to identify what type of experiences that you're looking for. Someone who's a senior person will be more capable and hopefully more, it needs less direction from you, but that person will also be more expensive. Whereas someone who's a junior person, that person might be smart, but is going to lack experiences and might not necessarily have the business skills, the communication skills that you're looking for. And so, so there's those type of trade-offs that you have to decide, right? Skills, experiences. Okay. So assume that you have those things figured out. Then the second step is that you're now going to have to broadcast your hire. Okay. So how do you broadcast your hiring? You're going to, post your job to job boards, Craigslist, or any other places that maybe that some developer network, forums that allow you to post jobs. So you find those places, you post your jobs. And then so basically you're trying to cast a wide net. And then you might
freelance. Even freelancing websites,
sure.
I think that would be another
freelancing website is another way of doing it. And, you might also go through recruiters, places that can help you to do further broadcasting because they are going to be better at this than you are because that's what they do all day long. You as a business person are unlikely to do this all day long on just hiring. You have so many other things that you have to worry about, right? So sometimes it also makes sense to hire recruiters to help you to recruit, and the process then repeats itself again. You then have to identify what kind of recruiters that you want to work with, what kind of skills, how do they charge, and so on. You have to identify those things, right? So you broadcast your hiring, and then 3, hopefully that the net is cast wide enough that you're starting going to get a list of resumes. Okay.
Yeah.
This list of resumes is your entry point to a list of people that you can potentially hire. It can be through freelancing websites where you're posting your job and someone applies, and it can be through the job boards where you're posting your job and someone applies, or it can be through recruiters where recruiters help you to go out and do additional reach to find these applications for you. They might be pre-screened. In the cases of recruiters, they'll pre-screen the resumes for you if they're good recruiters. Some of them are not that good, and they will not pre-screen their resumes for you. But whether they do or not, you still have to read through the resumes yourself. Okay. You need to read through resumes. You need to base on the resumes what they say. Try to see whether or not that the resumes matches what you're looking for. And this is most likely going to be an art because a lot of time. And here's just the thing. One, you're most likely going to get a lot more resumes than you have time to interview them. So you're not going to interview every single one of the people who submit resumes to you.
Sure.
Right. And 2, when they send resumes, a lot of time they are going to be embellishing things. And if it's first time you're reading resumes, you're probably unlikely going to be able to read through whether or not this is something that is true. And I can tell you that even with more experiences of reading resumes, you can start to get better at it, but you're still likely going to get it wrong. It's just really an approximation as an art. It's not going to be something that the most people can, unequivocally say that the resume alone is going to be able to inform me whether or not this candidate is any good. But you cannot help it. You just simply do not have time to interview everybody. So you have to filter the resumes. And then you had to basically translate resumes into a list of interviews. Okay. And since, the people who's applying for jobs will start to understand this process here. When they are trying to send out resumes and they hope to get interviews, and they want to improve their resumes, so on, and then but they might or might not get interviews, right? But when you're the hiring person, your problem is that a lot of time you're probably going to get more resumes than you can interview them. So now you have to reduce that number down, and then you need to call them and then see if you can arrange for an interview at some time. Let me put it this way: chance you can you cannot call them and say, I want to interview you right now. Can you do that? Because you're not giving the candidate a fair shake. The candidate needs some time to prepare for interviews. So they would need, so you would need to arrange for that schedule. And if you're going through recruiters, some recruiters can help you with that. And that's, this will come as part of the charges that they would be charging you for. But that's what you do. You schedule interviews, and hopefully the candidates that you called up are going to agree with you for interview, because some of them might happen to also just got a job offer that they want to take. So it's not 100% certain that when you call them that they will schedule with you for interviews. But once we can get the interview scheduled, then finally we need to conduct the interview. And then hopefully before you go into the interview, you have prepared a list of questions that you're going to ask them. And you're not just going to prepare a list of questions, you should also prepare a list of criteria, because criteria is how you will be evaluating them. And you want to evaluate them uniformly. So basically, you should evaluate multiple candidates on a single set of criteria rather than having different criteria for each individual candidates, right? So prepare your criteria, prepare your questions, and hopefully the questions will be very similar as well. Because if the questions are very similar, then you can use that to kind of judge, say, are these candidates, how do they perform against these sets of similar questions? Sometimes you do run into situations where if you use the same questions over and over again, they get leaked. And this is why there's a lot of websites out there that has Google interview questions and Facebook interview questions, because interviewers have a list of favorite questions that they want to ask. And then there are people out there who just leaks them, and then the next person prepares, beat them, and things like that. So we'll talk about that at a different time. There's obviously challenges trying to get everybody, trying to ensure that this doesn't leak, because it's kind of like a situation where they want to beat your interview process. They want to find a way to turn the advantage in their direction. So there are ways to circumvent that, but that's going to be, we're going to go beyond the scope of this question. Okay? So finally, after you conduct the interviews, you have a list of people performances that you can look at, and then you can pick the winner. And then make an offer. The offer might or might not get accepted, and if it doesn't, you go down to the next one. And then if no one accepts any of your offers, then you have to start over. But if somewhere along the way that somebody accepts the offer, then you can start to work with this person. So why does this process exist? This process exists as a official way of turning someone from stranger into a partner, but in a faster plus to the point. Okay. Because if you are trying to convert someone from stranger to acquaintance to friends to partner, there's a lot of nice things that come with it that's probably not necessary for a business setting. In a business setting, you don't have to have everyone you work with to become your friend. They can still work with you, assuming that there's a standard professional decorum that everybody observes, right? And if you turn someone into a friend, sometimes it actually becomes more difficult to work with that person. It's like, because sometimes you want to do friends a favor, and then because you want to do them a favor, you find it difficult to ask them to do what you need them to do as well. Right? But if you go through this process, then you should be able to identify a few things. And these are the things that what matter to you. Okay? Skills, experiences, and then also communication. Right? It's like,
Yeah.
are you able to? Does that person speak in such a way that makes you feel like you guys can work together? That's really the question, right? You want to be able to test that person out through this process, but this is never gonna be a perfect science. It all depends on the individual hirer's skill to identify, to filter for those people. You know, if you're inexperienced, chances are that your very first hire, you probably have to let go fairly quickly. And but as you get better, you should be able to reduce your mistakes in terms of hirings. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Hope this
Yeah.
answers the question.
Yeah. Okay, and the next question, again, it's a business question. So, is there any possibility that the freelancer that you found through freelancing website is unable, or you are unable to contact him or her anymore, and basically he disappears? And if so, how it can be avoided? Like, what can you do to make sure that the freelancer doesn't disappear maybe halfway through the project? Because I assume it might happen, actually. It does happen in certain projects. So
I imagine it
how to
does.
avoid it? Yeah.
When it's a freelancing thing, there's a few things to think about. One is that, and this is part, so let me just talk about what the differences are. So one is to hire reputation. Okay. And this is probably the number one thing to think about is that, so let's put it this way. Okay. There are companies that I can tell you that will not disappear. Accenture will not disappear. Okay. Microsoft will not disappear. Okay. Infosys, Chinasoft. All these are huge companies. And the reason I use them is because I can, even though I can give you some small companies, but it will not matter to you because you have not heard of them. But I can even tell you that there are companies that's coming down to one person company. They still will not disappear because they have a reputation.
Yeah.
Okay. And why do reputation matter? Because a lot of people are in businesses for long term. Someone who disappears on you are people who look at things short term, and they just want to get a quick out. They don't care about staying in this business long term, right? And so what does that mean? It means that if you hire people like that, then the way to mitigate it is to hire someone who has been in the business for a long time. They don't want people to trash their reputation. If they have been in business for a long time, it's much more important that their reputation don't take an unnecessary hit. They might still make mistakes, but they don't want to destroy their own reputations just because, basically, right? Because each individual money that they're going to earn is going to be such small amount compared to what they could earn if they maintain a good reputation. So always look for reputation, and reputation it's not always positively correlated, but it's well correlated with long time in business. The longer time a company is in business, the more successful they are, and the more they have to lose by just trying to cheat a customer. Okay.
Yeah.
And this is not 100% guarantee, but this is definitely the reason why that a lot of big companies buys big companies instead of buying stuff from startup. Is because they want someone who has a track record. That track record informs the purchaser whether or not that they can count on them, basically. Okay. So first thing you do is you hire for the reputation. Now, what's the second thing? Second thing you do is you pay by milestone. Okay. And now this is not always possible, by the way, because a lot of the softwares are paid on an hourly basis. And there's a good reason for that, to get paid on an hourly basis, because a lot of time the customers don't exactly know what they want. And so there's not even gonna be a milestone for them to be able to agree to. And if there is, it's way too vague They might be agree to something that takes 10 months to do, but the customer is asking for it in 1 month. And smart developers know that they cannot agree to anything like that. So they will not agree to it. Okay. But in the situations where you could structure your project by milestone, then what you want to do is you want to be able to pay when the milestone is delivered. So there's exchange that you get the work and I get the money, right? And that exchange will be fair. If there's no exchange of that work, then strictly speaking, you did not lose anything. You did not pay out anything that they didn't want. So ideally, you want to be able to structure by milestone if you could. But I also tell you that the chances are that you will find that this is very difficult to do in practice. So the project that you can structure by milestone are it will exist, and you will try to do it. And so think of it from that direction as you embark down trying to hire freelancers. But just so you know that sometimes don't fully insist on only going by milestones, because a lot of good developers knows that these milestones are not going to work, so they don't sign up for it. Okay. So if you insist on only going by milestones, then you will lose out those good developers to work with. Those good developers, they have a reputation that they are willing to work with you. They will not disappear on you. So always check number one first before you focusing on number two. Okay.
Yeah. And I just one follow-up thought. Actually, it's very interesting that software market doesn't really follow the same pattern with many other markets where like supply meets demand. And in software market also there is a supply and demand, but the way supply meets demand is a little different. And I mean, like it's basically only professionals, only people who work on this market to actually understand what's going on. And I totally agree with you that experienced software developers will not work on some kind of like sort of per project arrangement, like where you get paid only when you complete the project, because we know that to complete the project we actually need to go through certain steps. And sometimes the business owner might not really understand those steps and might not really be aware of those, and they think that basically they're just paying for the product software engineers are making. And I think software market is a little different from other markets where like, it's a little more uncertain, I would say.
It's quite uncertain, and there's a lot of information asymmetry. You know, the developers know things that the business people don't know about, and that lack of knowledge can really make things difficult for the business owners. So
That's true. Okay, so the next question is basically it's a question for you. In your experience, what's the most difficult thing for you to run your business? I mean, what's the biggest difficulty that you experience in your business? I'm sure there are multiple answers to this question, but like what comes to mind first?
I think if we're just focusing on what we're talking about, then I would say that the most difficult part is really just business education. Okay, because technology-wise, it's most technologies is doable in the sense that as long as they don't violate the fundamental laws of computer sciences, it's just a matter of saying how much, how long, how expensive, and how much work there is. So it's doable. But then, even though it's doable, it's not necessarily going to fit into the business expectations. They might be like, this is way too expensive. And they might be like, that's taking way too long. So on and so forth. Pretty much when it comes to software, everybody wants everything done yesterday at a price that's 1/10 the actual cost. Right? And so the biggest difficulty pertains to software development topic is really just trying to ensure the business really understands how exactly can software get developed successfully.
Mhm.
And a huge part
Mhm.
of it has to do with expectation shaping.
Mhm.
Has to
Mhm.
do with trying to make sure the business person understands what goes into software development. Because you can certainly deliver something correctly, but if you do not manage the stakeholders' expectations successfully, then that project will be a failure. You'll be
Yeah.
considered as cost overrun. You'll be considered as not delivering on schedule, and you become, so on and so forth. But the truth is that whenever there's a cost overrun, whenever it's not delivering on schedule, most of the time it's because people are expecting things that's not going to fit in that project management triangle that we have discussed before. They've been asking, it's basically asking too aggressive a schedule, asking too much a scope, and with not enough of resources doing the work. So it's really that part. It's really trying to ensure that the business are educated about what needs to be done. It's really ensure they bought in to the project plan, bought into the resource plan, and so on. And so I would say that's really the biggest part of the work. And sometimes if you do not sell them successfully, then there's no business, because they might come with the preconception that this thing costs, 10K to do, when in fact it costs 100K to do.
Right.
And then there would not be any business in that case, just because they simply, a lot of the software buyers, a lot of the business people who want to buy custom software development, they are not true buyers. They're not true buyers in the sense that they really are not yet ready to understand what goes into to do that type of work. That they should really become a buyer of pre-made software, and then try to use the pre-made software. And whenever there's a huge gulf in between buy versus build, and this is all the pre-made stuff, and this is the custom stuff, and this is like a huge trench in between. If you want to cross this trench, you really have to have a complete different mindset, basically.
Yeah. Custom stuff and also some completely new stuff. That's also quite an issue, because usually with new stuff, business people don't know what they're building. They just have a rough idea. They ask software developers to build it. And, it's not easy. Yeah. Right. I see. So we're talking about, again, the gap between the business people's perception of software projects versus what software developers are actually doing. And sometimes there is a lot of miscommunication and basically, a lot of misunderstanding.
Yeah, I mean, let me put it this way. Most of the business owners that I work with are great people that after you educate them, then they really understand what it takes and they'll work with you on that. Right? So it's really just a skill trying to make sure that everyone is all on the same page. And a lot of the developers will have a preconception of what business owners know and understand, because we all like to assume another person is similar to us in terms of background understanding. And so when there's a too big of a gap, that assumption is really where most of miscommunication happens, basically. So it's very important for people to not assume and just put in the effort trying to make sure the other person understands. But it's really going to happen on a one-on-one basis, because every business person is going to come with different sets of backgrounds, and every software developer is going to come with different sets of backgrounds as well. So there's not going to be a one-size-fits-all formula to solve that problem. It's going to be up to the individuals to communicate and trying to educate each other on the knowledge gap and things like that, so that way they can all work together.
Right. Okay. So the next question is, if the person is already running a business successfully, business such as a fitness club, for example, in a suburban area, and this person is about 30 years old, or in the 30s, and they want to get into IT field. And what should they learn? What kind of skills should they learn? What do they need to know? What's your advice on those skills? I mean, I assume that the person doesn't have any IT background or any experience, and so what should they start with? Mm-hmm.
It's really difficult to say exactly what you mean by get into IT field. I mean, if you're a business owner who has successfully managed a fitness business, when you want to get into IT field, do you want to get into IT field as a developer, or do you want to get into IT field as a software shop? Do you want to get into the IT field as a project manager? I mean, there's getting into the IT fields as an individual, or there's getting into IT field as an entrepreneur who's trying to start a business.
Yeah.
So what are we talking about here?
Yeah, I think it would be really challenging to answer that question in the context of each particular person, because they will have different motivation to do it. And I assume that it is actually possible. It is possible for a business person to actually invest money into a new IT company and just hire someone to run it, and this will be just a good business investment. But whether they're gonna actually learn IT, it's up to them. I mean, they could learn something. But if they, let's say, if they do so, like they don't want to become developers, but they just want to be business owners with business, or maybe business partners, perhaps, with other developers. And like, what would be one valuable skill for them to learn if they don't have any IT background?
So if they just want to be an entrepreneur, the very first skills that they have to have is listening.
Listening.
Right. This is just the same as when we talked about earlier that the most difficult part in custom software development is to educate the business owners. So if you come in without any IT background, and the first thing that you want to do is if you want to participate in an IT business, then you have to learn what IT business is all about. You have to understand, because as we talked about before, there's differences between different type of IT business. There's companies that produces software, the ISVs, so independent software vendor, right?
Yeah.
And then there's SI, so system integrators, right? And there are other ones as well, but different type of businesses have different models and have different issues. Basically, how do you make money? Then what is your revenue model? Are you by individual developers that you're hiring, or are you by the product that you create? And then if it's by the product you create, what is the industry that you're gonna be in? I would say that this person needs to spend a lot of time listening just to even understand these things, instead of coming with a preconception of how these things need to be run. Basically, that's really the biggest downfall of anyone who try to come in as a business owner. And then the second thing is to leverage. Okay, so as a successful business owner, there's going to be skills that you bring to the table. Okay, so perhaps you have operational experiences. Perhaps you're very great at marketing, or very great at sales. There's gonna be some skills that you are gonna be good at, and perhaps it's your domain knowledge. If you're a fitness business owner and you want to get into the IT field as a business owner, probably you want to get into IT field that is related to fitness. See, then that'll be leveraging multiple things. Be leveraging your business skills, but also as leveraging your domain knowledge on the fitness industry that you work in, right? So listening and leverage would be
existing skills.
Right, for the existing skills that I would say that's what you want to look for if you're trying to get in there as another business owner. Now, there might be a possibility that you want to get in there as a skilled person. Like maybe you want to become a developer.
Yeah.
Or maybe you want to become a project manager. Okay. All right. Now, in the case of becoming a developer, you have to learn a completely different set of skill, because as far as I can tell, there's almost nothing that you can directly leverage from your experiences as a fitness owner into a developer. There will be skills that you can bring above and beyond. For example, you're probably very good at talking to customers and that's a great skill.
Mm-hmm.
Although that's a skill that's not highly used in the developer field,
Mm-hmm.
but it certainly is a skill that will eventually come in handy once you move up the ranks. The higher ranking you go as a developer, the more likely you will spend time talking to customers. So that skill will always come in handy. But it's really a detour, basically.
Mm-hmm.
As a career path, I personally will not recommend that to be a career path, because it's almost feel like taking 2 steps back in order to get onto something else. Right.
Completely different.
Right. If you have a passion for it, by all means go for it. But otherwise, I would not recommend a zero technical person trying to become a developer if they're already successful. If they are not successful in their original field, then obviously that the development is in demand today. So it's a good skill to pick up, right? But if you're already a successful business owner, I'm not exactly sure if this is the best path to do. Compared to becoming a developer on the project management side, there is more leverageable skills coming from a business owner. Most of the project management stuff you still have to learn new things, because project management, while it's applicable skill across different domains, there are still gonna be specializations for the particular industry that you go into. So you have to learn how to project manage projects that are IT specific. But it'll be a much easier path, and you have more skills that you can leverage when you come in as a business owner. So I would say that if you're a business owner and you want to get into IT field as an individual skill person, unless you have a strong passion for development, or unless that you weren't truly a successful business owner in the first place, so therefore the path of development seems good to you, because it's still a in-demand field, then go for it. Otherwise, look for skills that's closer to, look for jobs that's closer to where your current skill is.
I can imagine that one reason perhaps for this question could be that, and even if it's true for me as well, because I'm not a software developer, and now I'm talking to a lot of software developers, and I realized that people often say that like it's easy, it's relatively easy, like anyone can become a software developer in just a few months by just learning the programming language, learn just this language or that language. And I used to think this way as well. I was thinking that basically just for me to become a software developer, you just need to basically sit down and start learning a language. Now I understand that, of course, it's not true. It's never been true. I mean, professional software developers are people who grow up as software developers. I mean, they get years of experience, they get a lot of projects, and that's how they become software developers. And they learn a lot of languages, but it's not about languages. It's about your experience really counts. So I think it will take a lot more time than just a few weeks.
Well, a few weeks is not possible. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what they're selling in code boot camps, but I would never tell anyone that you can become a developer in a few weeks. It's like when I first learned it, I would say that it took me about a full year to become comfortable with being a software developer. So that's what we expect is for anyone to do it. It would take at least about a year. And after that year is done, you'll be a junior software developer. Okay? So it's really a question of saying that is the junior software developer a better career than the existing career? That's really the question. Right? So the reason I said earlier that if you're a successful business owner, a gym owner, or just whatever fitness stuff, I don't know exactly what business that she has in mind, but if you're successful, can you not do better than being a junior dev? That's really the question. Maybe it's not. Maybe being a successful fitness owner still pays less than junior dev. Then in that case, it's a worthwhile trade-off. take a year, develop the skills necessary, become a junior dev, then you can have a better earning prospect potentially.
Right.
I personally don't know whether or not that's the case, but I imagine that if that's the case, I would not necessarily call the original person, the original business owner, as saying being successful in fitness. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's just different thought process. But being a dev can be a rewarding career. Maybe the person really dislike being a fitness business owner. There are things like that. You get burned out in your existing business. So even though it might be a better prospect to stay where you are, you just simply no longer like it. You want to do something completely different. There's that possibility as well. It's just that I think that overall those possibilities are less than the case where that the person is gonna look and say junior dev, that's a step down. I don't want to do that. There's gonna be more likely to be like that, I think. But it all depends on the individual.
Yeah, I think, just in my experience, I think there are two possible ways of getting into software development. And one way is actually to become a developer, and becoming a developer it takes a lot of time and a lot of dedication. And sometimes I actually question the idea of becoming a developer like in the middle of your career, unless you actually have a call of becoming a developer, unless you actually feel like it, and unless you start actually like solving problems and what developers do. Because if you just decide to do it for money, or if you just decided to do it to change a career, I think you won't probably become a good developer, like even after years of doing it. It's just impossible. I mean, to become a good developer, you need experience, and you need some kind of like a natural fit. Your mindset should fit naturally into software development process. In that case, maybe you have a chance to become a developer. And
I do know people who are successful in doing it, but I would still say that you should have a way to get your feet wet instead of just jumping in completely. Instead of trying to become a developer immediately, just try to do some part-time projects, right?
Yeah.
Again, like I said, take the whole year, and if you want to say that's a full-time work, divide that by 2. So do part-time development for 2 years. And if you can last part-time development for 2 years, after 2 years, you will know whether or not this is a career for you. Right. I will not be surprised that most people will give up after 3 months of them trying to do something like that. Right.
Yeah.
So
I just think the second possible idea or second possible option is that you work with developers, but you don't necessarily become a developer, because becoming a developer is almost like a different career, completely different career. So there is a chance that if you're a successful business person, you might actually start learning about software development, but not necessarily writing code. Maybe you can work on a business analysis side. Maybe you can work on project management. Of course, you need to do a lot of learning, and you need to actually work with developers every day. It's a given thing. But you might not necessarily actually have a goal of becoming a developer.
Yes, and I agree with that too. And I would say those are shorter path, but it still would take investment. I mean, as you know right now that you're learning how to become a PM, and it's not gonna be. It's also not something that anyone can just jump into and do it either. So no matter what, when you're switching career, it will take time, and it's gonna be a time that you have to be willing to invest in, basically. So it'd be the same for anyone, whether you're trying to become an individual skilled contributor, or you're trying to become another business owner. The nice thing about becoming a business owner is that if you're successful and you have the money to invest, then you can leverage other people to do the work for you. And so that in that case, you have to make sure that you know how to listen to other people's ideas. You got to make sure that you don't get, you don't try to say, I know everything under the sun, right? Because you're getting to a completely new field that you have no idea about. So it's much better to listen to people who has been in the field, who knows what they're doing, because it will take time to learn these things, and it will take time. People will make mistakes. So,
Mhm.
but the nice
I
thing,
can,
sorry.
yeah, it's interesting because I can see it even on Quora. I mean, I'm reading a lot of Quora answers by software developers, and I can clearly see like people, I can clearly separate people with experience from people with zero experience. And it's very clear because people with experience, they tend to write different type of answer because they tend to look at things from their perspective, from the experience perspective. And you can also find some answers, something like, oh, yeah, I learned software development in 3 months with that. And here is a link. So click
Yeah.
and get a discount. I mean, it's just advertising, and it's nothing to do with software development learning. It's just,
Yeah. I would say that the people can get good in about a year. I would say that a year is reasonable. Anything
Yeah,
less than
yeah.
that, though, I wouldn't say that's the case. So okay,
Right,
all right.
right.
And there
Okay.
more
Yeah,
questions.
next question. Next question. What do you need to know as a software developer, as a software engineer, if you want to earn $50 for 3 hours? Suppose I have plenty of time to learn a new skill, and but I have to learn it from scratch. So basically, I think the question is about becoming a junior developer. Especially looking at like $50 for 3 hours. It's not a lot of money in software development, obviously, but I guess that's what junior developers usually start with. And what do I need to do? How can I basically become a junior developer? That's the question.
Well, when you're a junior developer, basically you need to know how to develop software. I guess this is a very straightforward answer that doesn't say a lot. You need to know how to develop software.
Yeah.
Okay. You need to be able to write code, basically. And you need to be able to write code against requirements.
Yep.
Okay. Because the only way for people who's gonna pay you for $50 for 3 hours, which translates to about $16 per hour, is for you to be able to do things that people have asked you to do. Okay. Do things your boss asks. And your boss is going to be asking these things because that's what your boss hired you for. Here's the requirement. Write some code against it. Solve this problem. Okay. So what would those requirements be? Who knows? It depends on which particular boss you go work for. And what kind of software will your boss ask you to develop? I don't know. Again, it depends on which job that you get hired for. But what are the softwares that the people hire for these days? A lot of the websites. Okay, JavaScript is a big one.
Yeah.
Okay, Java is still big. Okay, this is for the backend. And if you're dealing with backend, you also need to know SQL. Okay, and sometimes you might be working with C++, but this is more. There's a lot of desktop softwares that are written in this, but a lot of system softwares are written in this. So if you're at the C++ level, this is consider the most difficult skills to pick up for a new developer today. Most of the other things that we're talking about are, comparatively speaking, easier technology to pick up. But on the other hand, they demand more of the domain knowledge. Okay. When you move at a C++ level, most of the time, as long as you go through a computer science curriculum, you will be using C++ to deal with most of the stuff that deal with computer science problems, basically. Okay. So most of the problems that people deal with at the C++ level, it's going to be more of a lower level stuff. Whereas when you're dealing with, say, SQL, Java, whatever, these type of things, it deals with more with the things that are the front end that people see. So if you're working for a fitness website, then you have to learn something about the fitness business to be able to do this more, basically.
Yeah.
Maybe, you've been knowing more stuff like e-commerce if you're working on an e-commerce site. So there's more the business domain knowledge that you're more likely to have to acquire when you work on the higher level type of technology. And you work on lower level type of technology, then you more likely will be acquiring system domain knowledge. So that's the difference between the two. But no matter what, once you acquire these knowledges, and you can go through computer science classes, you can go through co-academies, whatever things, or you can just do self-learning, right? Whatever things that teaches you that you can then try to build projects, gain experiences, and once you get hired at this price point, then you have to make sure that you can write code against the requirement. Okay.
Yeah.
And there might be a possibility that even if you get hired as a C++ developer, your boss might ask you to whip up a quick website. So then you have to go and spend time to learn about JavaScript, HTML, CSS, things that you haven't touched before. And this is where this is what becoming a professional developer means now. A professional developer will learn technology on the job. Okay, I pick up new technologies all the time, and these are not technologies that are taught in school, and you just have to spend your time to research them, understand them, know how to learn how to use them on your own time or on the company's time.
Yeah.
Okay, and once you're starting to get to this point, then anything goes. You're becoming a developer. You're not just a C++ developer. You're not just a JavaScript developer or a Java developer. You are anything developer. And you have to be prepared for that, because that's the only way for you to be able to continue to work in development. Because eventually, some of these jobs might disappear. They might shrink. The amount of work might not be as big as before. And you will find that it's difficult to continue to stay doing the same thing. You will find that some other new things are now paying more. So you want to move into those fields. So you have to pick up new things. So that's what professional developers do. They learn new things all the time. And that's the only way that you can continue to do this thing, basically. Do what the boss asks for, basically.
Right. So the next question is about, so I really don't have knowledge of IT, so I would like to ask you whether this website is reliable to know the way to become a software engineer. And the website is wikihow.com/become a software engineer.
Wikihow.com?
Let me answer this question. Try to answer this question first
All right.
myself. I think that this site can only inspire people, like give them some like idea, first impression, and after that you still have to go to specialized places, specialized sources of information, maybe the place where developers communicate, and maybe start asking questions over there, because obviously this is just very, very beginning of it's almost like if you're trying to become an accountant, so they just teach you numbers first, and then after that you still need to go to and talk to accountants. So I guess it's a very good start, but it's just definitely it's not enough even for a first step, because you still have to do a lot of steps. Yeah, so that would be my answer to this question.
I think that's probably a good enough answer. I mean, wikihow.com, I'm not aware of them having any sort of in-depth articles. It's like my understanding of what the type of stuff that they have on their website, it's all very, very high-level stuff. I mean, you might be able to pick up a particular technique, a particular small thing there. But if you're talking about, say, picking up a new career, I would not rely on wikihow.com to do that.
And I personally, I would recommend video tutorials, especially on YouTube. I think these days there are a lot of video tutorials that people are making, and some of these tutorials are actually very good. So basically, all you have to do is just to start following what other people are doing, and basically learn at least certain techniques or certain languages. You can basically pick it up as you follow other people doing specific project. And I personally like those tutorials because I think they're real, they're building some kind of software. So I would say that, so this is only for the very, very first impression, but after that you still need to talk to developers and basically
take some
start doing
classes.
something.
I mean, just take some basic classes.
Yeah. Yeah, and one impressive thing about software development is that many of those classes are available for free, and like even software developers often make those free classes without actually making it into a business. And I found it completely different from many other areas where like people are actually charging quite a lot for just taking any classes or sharing any knowledge, even if it's just a basic knowledge. And, like try to become a lawyer for free, for example, try to become an accountant.
Right.
Unless you pay money, it's impossible. Right? So it's just
But the second thing is to do projects, basically to write code. Okay.
Yeah,
if you want to be a software developer, you have to write code. You cannot be a software developer that doesn't write code. Okay. So take some basic classes, do some projects, write some code. That's just going to be a very good starting point. And then just continue to learn. And like you said, talk to devs. Ask questions. Okay. Solve problems. That's really what developers do. And then if you spend your day 24/7 doing that, you will be a developer. I mean, that's guaranteed. Becoming a developer is not rocket science. It's a lot easier than becoming that. It's but you just need to find things interesting and just need to decide that you want to write code, and then see the problem that you have getting solved by the code that you write. Basically.
And also from my experience, you don't necessarily have to start asking technical questions to those developers, because you can just start with just a normal conversation. I mean, if you can make friends with a few people who are developers, and even when you start asking them basic questions, I think you will learn quite a lot from just their experience. So you don't have to start with like, okay, so how do I write that particular piece of code? But you can just start with basic questions like you would normally ask your friends, some career-related questions.
One thing about trying to ask questions with developers though is to do your homework first. Okay. So basically, don't ask people to handhold. Okay. So no ask for handholding. Okay. Try to walk the path yourself. Try to struggle with it, and then ask the questions that you come across, rather than ask people say, "So how do I open a file? How do I start a project? How do I?" It's like you will find that a lot of developers are turned off by that, because most of the professional developers that made it, as I was answering the last question, is that they spend time learning technologies on the job. Okay, they had to struggle with the technologies themselves. They had to learn new things that they haven't tried before, and then they don't ask people to handhold them to walk through. So they will also get turned off by people who ask for handholding. And this is one thing that a lot of the beginners find repulsive when it comes to asking developers questions. They really hate sites like Stack Overflow, or if you have gone to Usenets before, the old Usenets are very, very brutal when it comes to answering questions for new developers. And we can argue which way it needs to be, but the truth is that this is how I look at it. If you are the learner, one, you definitely benefit from trying to do things yourself versus asking people to do things for you. Okay. And two, that most of the people there's gonna be more people who have the skills to answer your questions, but don't have the temperament to answer your questions than people who have both. So if you want to get as much as you can from other people, then you have to learn how to gain information from the majority of them, rather than just working with a subset of them. Okay?
Yeah.
So always try to work according to what others can give you, rather than asking people to give you more than what they are willing to give you, basically.
Right.
Because if you ask for more, they're probably just going to say, screw it, I'm not even going to spend time talking to you. And then therefore you waste a resource.
And I think it's a good advice for other fields as well, because I found the same thing. Like if you are learning marketing, for instance, I mean, you have to start doing some marketing project, and then of course you will have a lot of questions, you will get some help from your friends, but unless you start your own project, it's like you are still talking about abstract things. Like if you haven't tried it, it's like basically you're not learning anything by just getting those answers. And once you try it, you will come up with better questions,
right?
And you come up with some ideas.
Yeah, always do your homework first. You know, it's like there are a lot of people out there who's going to be just bashing people who haven't done homework, but you know, while as I think that they can be more tactful, it is true that until you do your homework, you're just wasting people's time. You're not really learning.
True.
Basically.
True.
Yeah.
I agree.
So, but once you do your homework, then you have good questions to ask, and then people will be able to and willing to answer those questions.
Yeah. True. Okay, and then the next question basically is about programming languages. Which computer language should I learn first if I want to enter the software development world? Is it gonna be like HTML5 or Java or Python? And I have no learning experience in computer science. And again, let me just share one idea from my experience. And I mean, I'm still in the same position because I won't be able to tell which language is the best, but from my experience, I see that Python is a little bit easier for beginners. It's easier to navigate, it's easier to write and read. So I would say that Python would be my first choice if I had to learn one development language from scratch. As for HTML, I mean, HTML is basically to me, it's not even a language. It's basically like I don't know. It's like letters we use in reading and writing.
HTML is a language. HTML stands for
it is a language.
Hypertext Markup language.
Yeah.
So HTML is not a programming language, but it's a markup language.
Markup language.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, but for me, to me, that the knowledge of HTML is so basic that basically, like, I don't even want to learn HTML as a subject. I assume that when you start learning development, you already know HTML, or at least basics of HTML. So I would say that I'm not really sure how is it different with HTML5. I mean, can you really learn it as a new language, or is it going to be the same as HTML?
HTML5 is not a new language. HTML5 is just additional markups, and then also the combination with JavaScript and CSS. That's it. So
yeah, and how I learned HTML basically just by developing my own sites and looking at code and just kind of copying and pasting that code into my site. That's perhaps yeah. I didn't actually spend any time on specifically learning HTML. I'm just whatever I know from my experience, I can use in the next project. So.
That's a good idea to think about it. So Python is certainly a good beginner language. As a matter of fact, Python is used in many computer science courses.
Yeah.
That people used to use Java. So Java is also a good language to learn. Okay. And the C++ or C, these are also good languages, but these are kind of low level for most people.
Yeah.
Because they still have to deal with manual memory management.
Yeah.
Okay. So these days, though, there's one language that you can use in many different places, and that's JavaScript. Okay. So JavaScript can be used in browser. It can be used on the server. It can
Yeah.
also be used on mobile. Okay, so if you want to learn just one language, and then you want a language to go very far, then JavaScript is a good candidate. Another good candidate is C#. C# can also be used. So C# cannot be used in browser, but C# can be used in browser via translation. Okay, there are tools that you can translate C# into JavaScript. And then C# is strong in server, and C# these days are also available in mobile. Okay, so for both Android as well as iOS. So Java used to be available in iOS through RoboVM, but I think RoboVM just closed down. So Java is now, you have to do a little bit more work in order to get Java to work on iOS. Now on the iOS platform, if you just want to learn iOS, then you can learn Swift. Swift is mostly going to be replacing Objective-C. But both of these are pretty much just the Apple platform. So unless you know for sure that you want to develop only for Apple, then it's a good idea to spend time learning about some of the other languages. But again, as we said before, developers spend their time to continuously learning technology on the job. So one of the most important things that as someone who aspires to be a developer is to get comfortable with the idea that you will be working with multiple languages. Okay, you will not work with just one language. Okay, now PHP is still the king of websites. Okay, especially if you're going to be spending a lot of time just kind of quickly do some website stuff, like then you're going to be working in PHP because you're gonna be working with tools like WordPress. WordPress is still the most popular website software that ever existed. Okay.
Yeah.
So a lot of people will still be working with PHP. Okay. So these are some of the most popular languages, and as a starting point, this is a good starting language, and this is not as good of a starting language because JavaScript is not as nice. There's a lot more corner cases with JavaScript than there is with Python. Okay? So Python is a better learning language to start with. But JavaScript is nice that once you learn it, you can use it in multiple places. It means that your language goes far, that you can use for multiple purposes. Okay, and C# is also a language that can go far because with the combination of Windows.NET as well as Mono, which is now called Xamarin, but that's also purchased by Microsoft. That C# covers a lot of the different platforms that you can work with. And so is Java. Java also covers a lot of different platforms that you can work with. So these languages go far. And C++ and C can always be used because it's a lower level. So, if you are just learning to code instead of learning about deeper computer sciences, you're probably not going to touch this until much later in the career. So, this one can be easily skipped. And Objective-C, again, this is just on Apples only. So. Yep, but that'll be what I suggest.
Okay, and then basically the last question, the question number 10 is if I want my software to be bought by a business person like Mr. Chen.
Okay.
What it should be satisfied as a product? I mean, what kind of how can I create the customer satisfaction? How can I convince you to buy my product? Basically, that's the question. Like, what would you recommend? Like, I want to sell software to you, and what would be your criteria, personal criteria?
Okay, this question can be read in two ways.
Yeah.
One is to sell software to me the same way that Microsoft sells software to me. So, which is by license. Okay. And another way to sell to me is that I buy the whole software. So I buy the business.
Mm-hmm.
So that I own the software.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the first way, it's really just going to be the same as any software. Business model. So basically, you have to first identify what problem are you solving.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, right now we are having a video conference.
Mm-hmm.
So, what is the problem? The problem is that we want to be able to talk remotely, but with as much of face-to-face experience as possible, as much real-time experience as possible. So, video conference solves the remote meeting problem. Okay. And people are willing to pay for problem being solved, right? What does GoToMeeting charge? GoToMeeting charges something like $19.99 to $49.99 per month. Something like that, right?
Yeah.
So there's a price value point that for a video conference. $19.99 per month to $49.99 per month. And people who have the problem of remote meeting, if they find the software solves that problem, they will buy it. Right? So if we're talking about by license, what software will be bought by me? What would I recommend? I would recommend the questioner to basically identify a problem that this problem is valuable for people to pay software for it to have it solved in that regard.
Yeah.
And like I'm writing right now, I'm writing on OneNote by just pen writing, right? So what does OneNote solve? OneNote solves problem for me, from my perspective, is allowing me to freehandly write down my thoughts as we talk. So therefore, I own OneNote. Yeah. So OneNote solves that problem. So identify a problem and identify how much people are willing to be paying for that problem, and then see if you have a business. And if you do, write a software for it.
Yeah.
Now, second one is, write a software in such a way that someone will be buying, potentially me, but someone will be buying it as a business. And so interestingly, it comes back to the same thing. Why would anyone want to buy another business? The reason would be that that business will make that person money. And how would that business make money? That business can only make money by solving problems that people will be paying for. Right? So to get to the second part, that someone will end up buying the software business that you created, you have to first make sure that your software have customers. Right? And whether it's a paid customer like GoToMeeting or free customers like Instagram, right? Instagram was acquired by Facebook for $2 billion, something like that, by making $0. The whole time they did not make any money whatsoever. Right? But because Instagram was used by so many people so quickly that Facebook realizes that it has a lot of value, so Facebook bought it.
Yeah.
Right? So build a software that people will use, and whether they will pay for it to use or whether they won't pay for it to use, if there's a lot of people use your software, then your software has a value. Then someone might or might not, they might still not, you might still not find anybody, but your chance of finding someone who's willing to buy your business, not just go through, go up a lot higher, basically. Yeah. So build a software that solves a problem, and then make sure that you tell a lot of people about it, so that way they will be willing to use your software. Yeah, that's the answer to both questions.
Right. Yeah, and I guess again it's context dependent, because basically, like, first to sell any software to you, I need to know about your needs. So if
Right.
I'm a marketer, basically, I need to know what kind of problems you are dealing with and what kind of solutions you're looking at. And maybe, of course, I would start with, I mean, of course, I can use different ways of reaching out to you as a potential buyer. So I can advertise my product, obviously. I can use social media. But perhaps, I guess when it comes to really buying process, perhaps I need to build certain amount of relationships with my potential buyers, and that helps a lot in selling the software, at least getting closer to the to the deal. And so it's in a way, it's even though we're using a lot of technology and social media, still business is very much about like personal relationships and kind of personal conversations, face-to-face conversations. And I guess that's true for many industries, including software development. Yeah. So
Very
that's
true. Very true. Okay, was that the last question?
Yeah, that was the last question, and I think it was a very interesting discussion, and we discussed a lot of points. I think that I hope that students will also learn a lot from your experience, and
Hopefully.
it's really great. Yeah.
And if you have any additional questions, feel free to shoot in my way. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much. And so.
No problem. Anything else?
Yeah. I guess that's all.
Okay.
That's all.
All right. In that case, I will pause the video.